Like we were saying earlier, that is the exact same project template that we have already trained a number of schools on how to use. We've got several schools who are up and running with this project and are off making their own immersive media and virtual tours. And like we've mentioned, all you really need is the 360 video camera. You'll use something like Adobe Premiere Pro for that very basic video editing. And then you'll grab Unity, the good old free version of Unity with our good old free project template that we just showed. And in a matter of, a few hours, your students can be making virtual tours and essentially doing your own curated Google Street View, maybe with some additional quizzes and audio material that you can view in a VR headset. It's pretty cool. So that experience that we showed is really kind of crossing the line from pure 360 video into 360 hybrid. And so briefly, we want to cover the difference between these main types of immersive media and some of the pros and cons of each one. We've already talked a lot about the pros for 360 video, very simple and usually very cheap to produce. You just get that camera, all the things that I just said. You get your camera, you get your headsets, and you get, some sort of video editing software like Adobe Premiere Pro, and you're off and running. It's super realistic. You feel like you're there. There's no interaction to mess up your users or confuse them. But that does mean that there's limited engagement. You can't necessarily jump back to a specific point and rewind, and you have some media controls when you're viewing it in the headset. But it's a video. It is what you would expect from the controls for just watching a video on YouTube, for example. The other thing that we love using 360 video for internally is as a reference whenever we are actually making a CGI experience. A great example here is, as Vinny mentioned earlier, we've done some projects with Mississippi Rural Water Association. And they've got a whole bunch of experts who do a whole bunch of crazy tasks working on infrastructure and plumbing in all these local towns and municipalities. And we'll go out there and film the experts with the 360 video camera, and we're getting the truth straight from the source. The experts are on camera, they're showing us what to do, they're telling us what to do. We've got the cameras pointed right at them so we can get all this high quality imagery. And then when we have to make our CGI, our actual interactive version of the content, we have that as our main point of reference, and usually don't have to go back and bother our experts again to ask additional questions. Now, when we jump into the hybrid, right? When we start adding additional functionality to the 360 video, like we just showed with the virtual tour project, that is where you can actually get some interactivity that can add that extra little layer to convey some additional information to ensure that your students are actually paying attention and staying occupied with additional engaging material, all with pretty minimal development. And this is where having these project templates comes in handy. It is great for adding any supplemental material, whether it's the quiz, the audio, or even overlaying some additional graphics, infographics, or even 3D models. The main limitation is, at the end of the day, it's still a 360 environment, which means that actual spatial navigation is limited. You can jump from one spot to the next, but you can't get that sensation of actually walking around a virtual environment and interacting physically, hands-on, with some objects and with the environment around you. If you want to do that, that is where a full VR experience comes in. Full immersive CGI, computer-generated imagery is by far the most time-consuming and expensive to produce. Because think about it. You need your virtual environment, which means that you have to have your 3D modelers. Your 3D modelers might be making the geometry, the actual meshes and points of your virtual environment or the things that you're interacting with. And then you got to make that stuff look realistic. You have to apply what we call textures and materials to your models. That's 2 jobs already right there. If you want something to move, you have to have somebody animate it. If you want some special functionality where, a thing happens when you do a specific thing in a specific order, maybe you have to write some code. That's another job. You've got your actual, programmer going in there and doing stuff. User interface, if you've got some additional buttons, that's another job. You can see how a production studio could fill all of these roles and have to pay people some good salaries to produce this kind of content. And pretty soon you're talking serious money to produce this kind of project. But the benefit is you are fully immersed and you have the freedom to explore and interact. And what we found time and time again is that's where really the most impactful learning happens. Whenever you can engage all of your learning senses by seeing and hearing and touching and reading, engaging all those senses at the same time through a fully immersive CGI experience definitely has its value. Just got to make sure it's actually worth the time that you took and the effort that you took to produce it. So that's a quick overview of the specific pros and cons of the experience types. One other thing I'll mention, a huge pro of 360 video is you don't necessarily need a VR headset to view it. You'll see whenever you go to our YouTube playlist that we actually have some 360 videos as some examples that we'll cover later in this presentation as well. You can view a 360 video on YouTube, and maybe you've seen them before. If you're viewing a 360 video on a 2D screen, you have the ability to click and drag to change your perspective, change which direction you're facing. You have some amount of control there for actually manipulating your 3D view while not being in a headset. Obviously, you're not fully immersed, but it is a huge benefit of 360 video on its own as well.